Welcome to the Pearls of Wisdom podcast, where we talk about the jewelry industry, running a jewelry store, the highs and lows, and everything in between. We interview amazing guests that drop tons of valuable knowledge to help you run your jewelry business. Stick around and open your mind to get ready for some pearls of wisdom. And I have my lovely guest host, Elisa Dillon from Southern Jewelry News. Everyone knows Elisa, and we also have Chuck Frey, is the president and founder of Charles Frey and Company, a veteran of the jewelry industry for over 35 years. Chuck specializes in facilitating industry-leading events like closing sales, retirements, and more. So welcome to both of you. I'm very excited, and we're going to talk about something very important to a lot of jewelry stores. And what do you think, Elisa?
Well, welcome, Chuck, as one of our guests on this week's episode of Pearls of Wisdom. I mean, Chuck is definitely our pearl, and he has some wisdom to give us today.
Let's hope.
So I appreciate, I feel like all our guests, now that we are Pearls of Wisdom, are little pearls, and they're all bringing out wisdom to us. So we appreciate that we have such a beautiful pearl today as Chuck. But I think we're going to learn a lot of things that jewelers, Guy, really want to know, and that's about retirement. So I feel like let's get right into it, and I think you can start out, Guy, with some things you'd like to touch.
Absolutely. So Chuck, talking about retirement, when owners want to retire, how often do they think selling their business is the answer? What is the reality, and what options do they have?
That's a great question. If we were to back up a few generations, folks that are in their 60s or 70s, it was possible to find a buyer for your store, but that's just not so true today. The issue is typically nobody wants to pay you the goodwill it's worth, and they're certainly not going to pay you the cost of your inventory if they're knowledgeable in the business. The typical jeweler, when they buy off the street, the common thought is they need to make their profit on the buy. So too with somebody that's interested in buying a jewelry store, if they're knowledgeable of it, and I would probably challenge every jeweler to walk out their front door, turn around, come back in, look at their own store and say, would they pay the full value of the store? Most people, when I say that, kind of laugh and said, no, I wouldn't, because they know better than to pay the full value of the store. So typically we find that there's two types of buyers: those without money that will pay you anything you want for the store, and hopefully you'll get paid before they do whatever it is that they do to the store long term. And then there's those that have the money and the knowledge, and they know better than to pay you the full value because they have to be profitable on the buy because they don't know your customers. They can't walk in. I can't walk in, buy your store, and know 30 or 40 years of customers and what you went through with them. I can't inherit your goodwill. Your best chance of doing that is with a family member in some kind of a succession because they've been working there and they know the customer base and can inherit the goodwill and can manage it and turn it into cash. Or somebody that's been there long term, like a manager or employee that's become a member of the family and again has been working there for a long time and can just pick up as you step back. And that's typically the best way. Turns out that particular kind of a buyer, a transition buyer, is the best buyer because you can get what it's worth. And the person selling the store, in that case, the retiring generation, is the best banker because they understand the marketplace and understand when they have to be forgiving. So that's typically how we see it today. The best option of getting your money out is typically to conduct a sale, turn the cash and goodwill into dollars that you can take out of the business, and then see if somebody wants to buy the turnkey. That's typically the way it goes today.
I'll tell you that we have done so many feature stories with retailers that have bought the store from their owner. Yeah, I agree. There's the best go with your relatives. But I have met so many people that worked with jewelers for years, and then they're the ones that end up buying the store. And you're right, they're the best ones. They're motivated. They know the store, and above all, I think they know the market. So I think that's really good advice on where you see how you're going to sell your store and when retirement is in question.
Right. We're involved in RJO succession planning, and by far and away, if we see, if we talk to 100 stores that were hoping to find a buyer, less than 10 actually do, and it's usually somebody that they know.
Right.
When they do find a buyer, so you were saying that they typically, do you find that they typically don't get what they think it's worth, or they feel like it wasn't a successful exit for them?
Well, usually, and this goes back to the original question, what do you pay for somebody else's jewelry store? How much do you pay for the mistakes in their inventory? How much do you pay for the goods that they've had for 10 or 15 years that haven't sold? How much do you pay for the customers that you've never met but have been coming there for 10 or 15 or 20 years and you know nothing about them? A good example of what occurs in the industry, a store in Wyoming, in business about 42 years, very successful, about $700,000 a year, about $400 in inventory cost, had been looking for a buyer for years and really couldn't find one. Finally took matters into their own hands, and we conducted a retirement sale that did $1.7 million. Okay. Now, there's no way that she could have gotten that return from a purchase of the store. And she couldn't even get an offer for the cost of the inventory. At the conclusion of the sale, she was able to sell the turnkey for $50,000. That's showcases, safe, mailing list, you name it, whatever was in the store. She got $50,000 for it because there was a 2-store chain. And if you're familiar with Wyoming, you have towns separated by a whole lot of distance. It's a big open state. And this particular owner had 2 stores in adjoining towns, which are probably 50 or 70 miles apart. And her location gave him a perfect little triangle. And so that's why he was interested in that location. But at the same time, he wouldn't have purchased the store from her for what it was worth. And I doubt even if somebody had made an offer to her, it wouldn't have come to what her goodwill cashed in, plus selling off her inventory generated for her. And that's typically what happens to these strong reputation stores, is they're worth more if they take matters into their own hands. And then they have the opportunity to sell the turnkey for additional cash. And I could tell you story after story this past season alone of stores that retired or closed where we did 160, 170, up to 200% of their annual volume in a 60 to 90 day period. No buyer is going to give you that money.
No. Wow.
Yeah, that's amazing. It sounds like an awesome exit for that owner. Just curious, Ted, have you heard of any other owners that did retire but kind of handled it themselves the best they could, and maybe their outcome wasn't the most, the typical or best case scenario for them? Have you heard of any other people saying, "Oh, we did this and it could have been better"?
Well, the unfortunate thing about that is typically if we interview somebody and they decide to do it on their own, obviously we wish them the best. And if we can be of benefit to them, we go out of our way to do so. But we typically do not hear the results back from those sales. It's rare that we find out. What you hear is, "We did great," but I don't know how to gauge a comment like that. Sometimes we have taken the time to look one up if we can find it in how they're advertising on the internet or something like that, because we typically can't see their local advertising, radio, cable, or newsprint, because we don't live there and we'd have to know what they're advertising. And sometimes what we see, I would just simply say is good craft, but not up to the speed of what we would consider professional craft. So how that impacts their results, I don't know. I would say that a good store taking it into their own hands isn't going to have a bad response. I just don't think they're going to hit the responses that a professional can bring to the table.
Right. Wow. Okay. When people come to you, and I hear, from jewelers, they want to figure out how to retire or move on, and figure out how to do take the next step in their life and retire, and after working so many years, do some typically have a challenge with closing their business that they've developed and built for years? Is that something that it's a little bit of a reality check for them?
It's probably anxiety too. I mean, these people, I imagine some of them are very hesitant about doing it. It's scary. I mean, right, Chuck?
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. I tell the story about the second longest I ever waited was 10 years for somebody to make up their mind and finally do it. And
wow.
The longest was 15 years. And these were people that I spoke to every year or every couple of years, and they just couldn't go about it. The big issue is somebody does something 25, 35, 45 years of their life, 6-day-a-week retail. They get up every morning, they go to the store, and all of a sudden they're confronted with that's not in their life anymore. How do they fill up that time? So taking that leap, it's a leap of faith, and you can't hurry somebody emotionally. And so, that what we do is when somebody says to me they're interested in retiring, I add 1 to 5 years, simply because it takes that long many times. And who knows what triggers it for somebody to finally do it. They wake up one morning, and I've gotten many of these calls where I get the call and I said, Chuck, how soon can you get me out? Because they've just reached that point. And who knows what triggered it in their life, what life event. It could be anything. But what I can tell you is once you've made the thought to do it, you are going to do it. It's just when. And that's when we should be talking about the how, okay? We should be talking about how to get your store ready for something like this. We should be talking about your inventory. We should be talking about your markups. We should be talking about your mailing list. We should be talking about how you advertise in your neighborhood. Doesn't matter if it's 2 or 3 years later. All that lead up can only lead to a better sale. It kind of goes back to your last question. Somebody that takes it into their own hands, sometimes, and I would say this to somebody, I say this all the time, there's nothing we do that's magic that other people can't do. It's just that we've done it 1,200, 1,500 times. When somebody asks themselves, how much should they spend in advertising? All I have to do is look at your numbers, build a projection, and I'll tell you how much you should spend in advertising. If somebody asks, where should I advertise? We'll bring in a professional media planner, interview you, and say, well, gee, these are all the opportunities. Which ones have you used? How did you feel about it? And what do you think about this idea? So those are the differences. And what I would say is if somebody's thinking about it, they should get in a conversation with somebody that does it, a firm like mine or any other firm like mine, and get the conversation going. Get a feeling for how it works. It's highly beneficial to the result.
Lisa, you've been around the industry for a long time, and with Southern and Mid-America Jewelry News, and before then, do you? I'm sure you've heard a lot of people wanting to figure out how to retire and so forth, and you guys probably covered that a lot in the in the news. Is there a lot of resources or stories that cover that in Southern Jewelry News?
Oh, I believe Chuck, a few years ago, Chuck wrote an article for us that was basically going over some of the strategic planning and things that will help. So yeah, definitely we have some sources. Go on the website. You can just, search in retirement, and any articles that we've done on retiring should come up, particularly that one that Chuck wrote for us. So definitely check us out as a source. I have a question. I was wondering, like with COVID and all that, jewelers were up to 30-35%.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Were you seeing an increase of jewelers wanting to retire after COVID, or has it stayed the same?
Well, it was a very interesting cycle. When we had, when the announcement was first made that the country was going to shut down for 2 months, March of 2020, I got calls from I don't know how many vendors saying, you're going to be so busy, we'll ship you anything you want. Okay. Just the opposite occurred. In states that were shutting down or that they were really applying the distancing rule, it made no sense to actually run a sale because you didn't know if you'd be shut down. We had that spring, we had a total of 9 sales signed, 2 started. One of them had just exploded. It was a retirement sale. In the first 2 weeks of the sale, it did $250,000, and they were only a $600 a year store, $600,000 a year store. And they were shut down by the COVID, by the country shutting down. The other one had only just started, and so it shut down. And they were both able to restart months and months later, and the other sales we did were canceled. The following fall, Christmas, when normally we might do 15 sales, we did 3. The following spring of 2021, when we normally do 7 to 10 sales, for the first time in my 33 years of doing sales, and just to make a quick correction, I've been in the industry 43 years. I started back in the 70s. Okay, in 33 years of doing sales, we had 0, and I wasn't the only company that does what I do that reported that. We all talked to each other, and everybody saw that. The following fall, which would have been Christmas of 21, 22, we did 7, and what I can tell you now, we are April of 2022, and they're pouring through the door for Christmas of 22, 23. I think what happened is people who were planning to retire saw the handwriting on the wall that it could be difficult, and so they chose not to. As a matter of fact, we advised people not to because we didn't know if they'd be interrupted. And you didn't want to put somebody in a starting position and then only to have it interrupted because it's, like they say, it's a 1-bullet gun. You get to fire it one time. It better hit the center of the black dot or the owner loses out. And so we would advise them not to. Then the amazing thing happened. Jewelry took off like a shot. Vendors didn't have enough inventory. They were selling out faster than you could shake a stick. And so if you were planning to retire, why would you retire if you're 30 or 40% up? You got to be crazy. And so they didn't. Now I think what's happening is the cycle has reversed again. And those that had planned to go out, they're marching to the door as fast as they can. They just postponed it by a couple of years. And so we're seeing a significant increase in interest. And we're seeing it in top level stores. We're seeing stores, we're talking to at least 6, 7 stores right now that average $1 million a year and have been in business an average of 40 years plus. They are definitely the top of the top, and people who had been talking about retiring 2, 3 years ago. So that's the cycle I see. I presume that will also change, but that's the cycle I'm seeing.
I'm sure. Did you just talk to the Georgia Jewelers Association? That was this past weekend.
Correct.
I hear that you were did a PowerPoint presentation on this subject.
Correct.
So I hope that was successful. I know that the Georgia Jewelers Association is a great, organization with all the associations. I mean, guys talk to some. You're a great speaker. So I know that you probably help them out a lot. I know you'll also be speaking at, or people can see you, Chuck, at RJO. I know you're a member. You've been a long-standing member there. We see you there. And you're always a mainstay at the Atlanta Jewelry Show.
Correct.
So definitely to all the folks out there who might be RJO and going to AJS, sit down and talk to John. John is Chuck's associate, Chuck and John. They're so full of knowledge, and they'll share a glass of great whiskey with you in this meantime.
But if they force us to, we'll just have to do that. Yes. One of the things I would say, going back to RJO about 8, 9 years ago, put together a succession program and a next generation program. The succession program, which happens every couple of years, invites stores with their potential successor, whether it be a family member or an employee, a long-term employee, to sit together and hear about the process of doing this. One of the things that I would say If you have a succession plan, the toughest thing to pinpoint is the purchase price. That is a moving target, and that's a difficult thing for people to do. There's a lot of different ways to do it. We talk about that in succession. The next thing is, can you put together a realistic buy-sell plan? You really do need to have a master document, because who knows what the future brings. You need to have some controlling document. It goes back, though, to what I said is the successor is the best buyer and the retiring generation is the best banker. But those are things we talk about it. The Next Gen program, which I also highly recommend, is where all of the successors, that's the generation taking over, they gather together and they talk about their needs. And that's a very healthy thing. So I would highly recommend, if you can get into any program like that. I know that RJO does it. I don't know if it costs you anything, but I highly recommend that you consider it if you're an RJO member. And if you're a part of a group that has something like that, don't hesitate. Any amount of information is valuable in the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, that's some really key information, and I'm looking forward to both of those shows. That's going to be amazing. Chuck, why don't you just, I think you shared a lot of really great information about retiring and what people should do when they're thinking about it. How can they get in touch with you if somebody wanted to ask you some questions and learn about the process?
Well, any number of ways. Probably the easiest way is just to place a call. Toll free 888-688-1881. That terminates right in my cell phone. I can receive you wherever I am on the planet. Obviously, John and I travel a fair amount because we visit every store that we work with, because in the process of putting together a program, the first step is to sit down and look at your numbers, create a projection, look at how things could come together on paper. But as we all know, sometimes the paper doesn't necessarily match what you see at the store. And certainly we need to meet the staffs, and we need to meet the owners, and we need to see the neighborhood. All of that has tremendous impact on how we proceed. So we do travel a fair amount, and so if we don't answer right away, we'll get back to you. You can also go on our website, which is currently being updated, but you can find us at Charles Frey, Frey Co.com. And there's plenty of things there that you can help give you an idea of what we can do and how we can go about it. So, but I would encourage anybody, again, all conversations are confidential, and there is no obligation. And if you did ask us to put together a projection to see what kind of the numbers look like or how they face out, there's no expense to that for you either. And if we come and visit, there's no expense to you either. All of that is things that have to be done just to make sure that we're putting the program together right. It's, going back to the comment I made about there's nothing here you can't do, but it's a lot of moving parts that have to be coordinated. And it's a lot of subtle nuances that can make a difference in what the financial return is. Again, I would just highly recommend anybody considering it, getting in a conversation with somebody that does it for a living.
That's awesome. And one of the reasons why when Elisa and I were talking and said, I'd really love to have Chuck on the podcast, because, when we've talked with each other at the shows, you really, you can feel and experience your knowledge and skill in this, in doing this. And I can really see that you care to provide people with knowledge to help them make a informed decision, which is amazing. And you certainly have done that this show, as the show suggests and says. We have pearls of wisdom, and like Elisa said, you really dropped a lot of knowledge bombs here. So thank you so much. And so this has been awesome information from you, Chuck. And Elisa, I think this has been great. What do you think?
It has. I'm so excited to keep our podcast going, have great guests like Chuck who can give out those pearls of wisdom. And we also want to acknowledge that today Chuck and his beautiful bride, Sue, are celebrating 30 years of marital bliss
Yes,
today.
we are. Mm-hmm.
So, Chuck, to you and Sue, we want to wish you a happy anniversary and many more.
Thank you.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. That's so much appreciated. Right. Thank you.
Well, we are in the industry of love and anniversaries and getting married, and so it's important. And 30 years is a milestone. So, congratulations to you and Sue. You guys check out Chuck. He's just one hell of a guy to talk to. Sit down, give him a call, and you'll learn so much. It doesn't cost you anything, like you said. There's no obligation. If you're thinking about it, you need to start strategically planning now. You can put together a retirement plan like that, but really, you do need several years, and go talk to an expert. It's hard to do it by yourself. You need the support. Mm-hmm. So, my 2 cents.
No.
All right. Well, Chuck and Lisa, that has been amazing. We are about time here for the podcast. So thank you so much for joining us. And
we thank you for the privilege of being a part of it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So thank you for listening to the Pearls of Wisdom podcast. Please make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Stay tuned for the next episode. And for more information about the podcast, go to southernjewelrynews.com/podcast. And don't forget to join our newsletter. Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Elisa. Have a great day.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.